Well, I think we're ready to get started for the deep dive. I want to say welcome to everybody this morning. As you're logging on, we've already got a good group on. I think about 50 or so folks that have logged on early as the countdown was going on, but it's a great way to start the Monday morning. It's Monday, July 29th, last Monday here in July, and excited to get this week going on this topic. We're going to be talking about home prices, and this is a topic that certainly is in the news these days, and we're going to break that down here over the next few minutes. I'll give it just a minute to let some others join, but see people joining from all over. Fred, see you there. Sarah, see you in St. Pete and Tampa. Linda, great to see you. Paul in South Florida. So many people. Dennis, see you there. So many people joining from all over the country that start their week with the deep dive. Great to have you on and get going. I think the topic this morning is one that is being talked about. What's ahead for home prices? And I'm going to sort of break down where we've been, where we're at right now, and what's ahead. And here's something to keep you around. We've got some of the 2025 next year forecast for home prices, what folks are saying is ahead. So that will be good to kind of go through, because I think there are going to be more conversations about this and more headlines about this as we go throughout the fall. Even this morning, you start to look at some of the news reports and things that are kind of saying, hey, where are consumers at? Are they spending a little bit less right now? What's going on? So we will cover all of that. So good to see everybody. Tamara, see you there in Alexandria. So great to have you on. So good to see everybody. But if I think about this topic of home prices, where it comes from is, sort of the inundation right now of headlines that say, can we expect a market correction? Or here are the housing markets that are most at risk for a downturn, a correction. Talk about, I know there are folks on this morning from Florida seeing more and more inventory, home staying on the market longer down in Florida. And really sort of debating, is this market overpriced? And in some cases, I'm sure there are people who will say yes, and probably some truth to that in some places. But I want to say this before we get started. We're going to talk about the national price scenario. There is no doubt that different markets and different price points are going to respond and react pricing wise over the next 12 months differently. I do believe there will be some plateauing in pricing. There will be some markets that will soften in price, and we'll talk about that. I'll give you the latest that we have, but I think always knowing what's happening nationally and then combining that with what's happening in your sort of backyard and in the area that you're working with is what folks need to hear right now. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We're going to break this down. The topic, the word that comes up more times than not is the term correction. Will we see a price correction? Danielle Hale, the chief economist for Realtor.com, said the word correction doesn't have a numerical meaning in the context of real estate. She's absolutely correct. In stock market terms, a correction is generally referred to as a 10 to 20% drop in prices. And then anything above 20% drop in prices or below, however you would say that, is considered a bear market. We don't have the same established definitions for the housing market. I can tell you right now, I don't see anybody reputably calling for 10 to 20% drop in home prices. We will talk about what they are saying. Nicole over at Zillow says this: when we talk about a price correction, what we're really looking at is prices that have been appreciating really aggressively, and all of a sudden they slow down rapidly. Now we're gonna break that down, but I think coming out of the last several years, rapid appreciation, we certainly talked about that extensively here on the deep dive, and now we're seeing a more normalized market, prices moderating, and people are wondering, okay, what's next? What will this bring? And even demand coming down this year from the rise in costs and the rise in mortgage rates. People saying, okay, we're gonna kind of wait and see what happens. That plays into effect as well. But the question on the table is a market correction possible? U.S. News said this: the short answer is never quite what you wanted to hear. Maybe. It's often difficult to make a declarative statement about current conditions until they have been evident for some time. Certainly, I believe there will be markets that will see plateauing. There will see some markets that see price softening and maybe some declines. But overall, the forecast for the national housing market is it'll be much more normal appreciation. I'll get to that in just a minute. Much over the last 20 plus years, the average outside of the sort of outlier unicorn years has been between 3 and 5% home price appreciation each year, and that's certainly what forecasters are saying for this year, and I'll show you in just a minute what they're showing for 2025. But if you look at the year-over-year price changes, this will look from Case-Shiller. This measures prices each month year over year going back to January of 2022. And what do you see? You see prices start to moderate, right? We're not seeing this dramatic price appreciation around 20% that we saw in the early part of last year. We're seeing, the early part of 2022, we're seeing a much more normalized look. And the data certainly supports that. It supports the fact that prices are moderating. And really, if anything, it's a sideways movement in prices. A sideways movement of home prices would be more of a plateau than a correction, rather than seeing prices decline and reset the market. So I think this is important right now. This sideways movement in prices and maybe a plateau is likely what we'll see. We've talked about this, and I think one of the best ways to explain this, if you're a KCM member, you have access to this slide, is the lack of homes in most markets. Now, I started off the call talking about Florida, where we're seeing more inventory come on the market. Maybe if you're in a market right now where you're seeing more inventory, certainly put that in the comments. But most markets, by and large, do not have the number of homes available for sale for the number of people that want to buy them. And that keeps upward pressure on prices. That's the best way to give people a look at why homes have appreciated, right? There's a severe undersupply, and we've used the new build slide so many times at KCM to show that visually how that looks. But even if you go back and I'm going to sort of underscore this point, you look at Case-Shiller, you look at CoreLogic, you look at FHFA, and they all show that prices are sort of ticking along at this normalized rate. So that's where we've been. Now, the question is right now, where do we stand? And we'll get into in just a minute what's ahead. Well, we've been sort of charting this normalized course for, gosh, I'm going to call it this goes all the way back to January of 2023. You can see it on the left side there. Certainly through the fall of this year and the beginning of 2024, we saw more normal price appreciation. But there are some cities right now that there are question marks. Ken Johnson from FAU does such a good job. We've always followed him here at Keeping Current Matters. He said it appears that cities that had trouble with their pricing around 2007 are having trouble again, but nowhere near as bad. On the other hand, some cities that were fortunate enough to avoid a significant crash last time around are at greater risk today. So I think looking individually at markets that could see some challenge is what we need to look at. Now, I want to preface this. There's a really good slide that I'm going to show you from Parcel Labs that shows the run up over the last several years and then their change from that peak. And I think it's overall a very, very positive sort of look at the reality of home prices. And it's right here. This from Parcel Labs are the 15 markets with the highest home price. And they use the word correction. I don't love that term, but these are the markets they say are at the most risk. Now, if you go down and you look here, if you can see that, if you're a KCM member, go in and download this slide. Certainly, if you're in any of these areas, and look at the growth since 2020. And then the change from the peak in 2022. So most of these markets running up in price by 50%, and then seeing somewhere on the top end, maybe a 4% change. maybe a 1% change, maybe not even a full percent change. And then you see markets as well that maintain their gains with no decline yet that maybe are still at risk. I think the moral of the story right now in the market is that certainly we saw unhealthy appreciation during 2020, 2021, 2022, all the markets that we know, and maybe giving some of that back, no doubt. But by and large, I don't think every market or the majority of markets for that matter are going to experience that, but some will. But really, I think the story and what I would be saying out there is this: experts are really leaning towards a moderation in home prices and their growth over the next 5 years. This translates to a slower and more sustainable pace of appreciation compared to the breakneck speed witnessed in recent years, rather than a free fall in prices. And that's a good thing. I'll get into a minute about how that helps certainly the national landscape, but it helps with affordability, right? If homes are not going up the way that they had in the past, that's a good thing ultimately for affordability. Doug Duncan said this: we continue to expect home price growth on a national level to decelerate. That's not the same as depreciate, decelerate just slowing, but remain positive over the near term. But it should be noted that conditions often vary by region, particularly as it relates to supply. For instance, many Sunbelt metros are currently seeing significant increases in for sale inventories, in part due to new construction, while supply in much of the Northeast and Midwest remains extremely tight. This is going to be the story. It's sort of the tale of two markets: the market that maybe sees more inventory come online, the market that doesn't have enough inventory. Being the expert in your local market, saying, here's what's happening on a national level with prices. Here's what's happening right where we're at. Let me show you what's sold. Let me show you what's happening right now. I was reading here, Jim, you said this has been the case for a while, at least a year ago, and the same statement was made or could have been made. For sure, I think we've seen these price questions and price debates that have been happening over the last year, and people sort of saying, okay, what's next? What's going on with everything happening? Let me give you what folks are still saying for this year, and then we're going to take a look at 2025. So for this year, this is the latest look as of 7/23 of the 7 forecasters here that we followed for 2024. Them, saying around 3%. If you ask me, 3 to 5%, probably when it's all said and done, from those that are forecasting prices for this year. But what's ahead for next year? I think is we talk about where we've been, where we're at right now. Many are saying, well, if prices plateau, what does that mean? Does that mean, we won't see as much price appreciation? Well, here's the first look at 2025 home prices. And we've got a slew of folks here: Goldman Sachs, Wells Fargo, MBA. You see the whole thing right under 3%, 2.7% home price appreciation going into 2025. So I don't see any of these forecasters calling for this massive downturn in home prices. And I think it follows sometimes what people think, or maybe the conventional wisdom. They sort of apply this logic that what goes up must come down. It's certainly not true with homes right now, but being the expert in your market is true. Lance Lambert said this: even if the national average for home price 2025 is correct, it is possible that some regional housing markets could see mild home price declines, while some markets could still see elevated appreciation. This has been, after all, the case this year. So difference in certainly in different markets, differences in the way that markets sort of respond and react to growing inventory, slower demand, and we're seeing that difference all across the country. Last, I'll end with this: Odetta Cushy. Odetta does such a good job with everything she forecasts. While housing affordability is low for potential first-time home buyers, slowing price appreciation and lower mortgage rates could help. So the dream of homeownership isn't boarded up just yet. That is a very, very good thing. Odetta said it better than certainly I could have. But I think as we see slower price appreciation, forecast for lower mortgage rates, this bodes well for people. I would be out there with this message. Certainly I mean, I'm talking to a lot of people that are working with 2-1 buy downs or figuring out how to help people get into a home affordably. And then if that is the case in the next couple of years, they can refinance. Certainly not suggesting that somebody would buy something they can't afford, but there are ways to navigate this market. There are things that are happening that I do believe will be advantageous for buyers. We'll be back next week with the deep dive. This last one for July. It's always so good to see everybody on. Take this message out about what's happening with prices and share it. As always, we want to give you all the resources that you need to be able to share all of this with everybody you're working with, so they're the most educated on these topics, so that you can be the knowledge broker in the market you serve. So we'll see you back next week on the deep dive.